Yep. Thank you so much for having me here. My name is Josh, and I'm a co-founder of Griffith Technologies. And for context, Griffith Technologies, we are a Hong Kong-based startup focusing on Asian plant-based foods, and particularly innovating in the plant-based fat and protein space. We're also Hong Kong's first B Corp certified food manufacturer. Solving for why is a very, very exciting topic. I think we've had some very thoughtful and deep sharing earlier. And we'll try to spin a more entrepreneurial and commercial angle on this topic. And we'll go through some whys, guiding basically why we founded the startup, and also some challenges and whys that guided our strategies, basically. Yeah. So obviously, as a plant-based startup, we work in the food space. So the first question really is like, why food and why plant-based? So what we eat every day is actually one of the most impactful decisions that we can make in the environment and ecosystem around us. When you think about what we eat, what you think about might be more, hey, where's the next restaurant we're going to be going to? What dish are we having? Or if you go to a supermarket or convenience store, it's more like, hey, what product are we getting off the shelf? Maybe you'll take a look at the ingredient list on the back. But your concept of food kind of stops there. But food ecosystem is way beyond that. When you look at food, when you look at meat, for example, you have the entire meat supply chain that goes behind it. So the cold chain logistics to the slaughterhouses, and then you go to the animals themselves. And beyond the animals, you actually got to think also about the food that they're consuming, the crops, and also the value chain behind that. So the farms and the agriculture behind that. So all of these steps actually require a lot of land. They require a lot of resources for water, as well as the manpower related to handle these different aspects. And just for concept on a greenhouse gas emissions perspective, this entire food supply chain actually emits more greenhouse gas, for example, than you'd expect from all transportation combined. So when you look at this in the grand scheme of things, with more people being born every day, population growing, families getting wealthier, and people eating more proteins, it definitely hits you in the gut. Hey, maybe you need other ways to produce the food that we're eating today, more sustainable ways to produce the foods that we require for the future. So specifically, why plant-based? So when we first started, we looked really at, hey, how does it really work today? So imagine in the case of Asia. In Asia, one protein that we really like is pork. So when you look at pork, you look at a baby pig, right? From birth to slaughter, we're talking about 28 weeks of basically nurturing and growing the pig. And this pig, on a daily basis, it needs to eat, it needs to drink water, and it needs to probably give out like some farts and emissions. And all of this effort just to grow a single pig. And this single pig, only 50% of that is really edible, because like half that is like, bones and different parts, maybe a bit higher in Asia because they eat like intestines and all that. But half of that, only 75 kilos of meat produced on average for a pig. But say you have a different way to convert from crops directly into a product that gives you that meat experience using 1/10 of the resources and way less time needed to produce the same amount of food. And that's really the origination of why plant-based can be considered as an alternative way to produce the foods that we eat today. So when we first started the startup, it was really less about being vegan, really less about being woke. It's about really thinking, hey, this might be a very interesting and sustainable way to produce the foods that we love today. So my co-founder and I, we created Plant Seafood, just for context. And it's really about producing next-gen plant-based foods, really more suited for Asian palate, or covering the Asian food category. So looking at proteins that people enjoy in the Asian umbrella, so more like pork and chicken, and also Asian products, so like dim sums, for example. So that's kind of like our starting point. Asian foods, plant seafood. We've definitely faced a wide range of challenges. And here right now we want to share with you 3 whys that kind of guided what we did and how we grew the business. So the first why is meat so tasty, right? And why is existing plant-based products not so tasty? So we first looked at why meats are so tasty. So actually a lot of that taste, 80% of this comes from smell. So if you try eating foods covering your nose or drinking wine covering your nose, you realize you actually lose at least half the experience. And when you say, hey, where does the smell come from? So actually a lot of the juices and aromas coming from meat actually originates from fat. And we looked at existing plant-based products. Hey, how are they dealing with fat today? So actually with fats, and in the first versions at least, there's not really any engineering around fats to make it more like meat-like. There's no functionality baked in the product. It was more frozen plant-based oils, specs, and once you pan fry, it goes away. It's not really fat per se, but just visual mimics. So for us, when we first started, our first innovation was really around fat. Plant-based fat 2.0, or our patented technology, airlines. So the concept here was really around using plant-based ingredients and trying to recreate something that is like fat. So something when you bind it with proteins, give you that similar bite force. Something that when you cook it, especially in the Chinese cooking context, so more like steaming, boiling, it looks like fat, so turning translucent, for example. And also engineered in a way so that it doesn't fall apart. It retains structure and integrity when cooked. So that was kind of like our first angle approaching, hey, why do meats taste the way they are? And our solution really on the fat angle. So the second why, or second problem we actually face a lot with is the concept of processed foods. So why do people in general perceive plant-based foods as being overly processed? So thinking first principles again here, right? Plant-based foods generally, by design, they use plant-based proteins. And plant-based proteins, because they're not meats, they have a base flavor. So depending on the type of protein, you have different types of base flavors. And as a plant-based substitute, to have a meat-like experience, you probably need to add other ingredients. Whether it's to mask the base flavor, whether it's to add meat flavors, or whether it's to give it some other element, for example, like the bleeding element, then you have more ingredients. And the general perception of processed foods here is like the more ingredients there are, the more processed it is. So in our case, how do we really try to tackle this problem? There's no avoiding combining different products to produce plant-based meats. But here, our strategy, our goal was really to produce plant-based products which had the shortest ingredient list. So what does that really mean? So first, on the plant-based protein layer, we try to source strains of proteins which had the least base flavor. So similar concept in wine, for example. You source from different regions around the world. You have wines which are more sour, wines which are more fragrant. So in the case of soy proteins, they're soy proteins which have less base flavor. So secondly, we try to optimize and use more natural flavorings. So we avoid OE numbers, no synthetic artificial flavorings. But obviously this had an impact on our cost structure, and also finding ingredients which can perform in different cooking scenarios. Because flavorings react differently, whether it's oil-based reactions or water-based, depending on your cooking methods. So following on the third point, since we're focusing a lot on Asian foods, especially dim sum application at the start, we optimized our formulation for water-based cooking, steaming in this case. So the third why we wanted to cover today is more business-oriented, and really the main one. So why plant seafood? Why should big established F&B groups pick plant seafood over the bigger brands, the more well-funded brands in the market? So here, we took a 5-pronged strategy covering 5 areas to make the case for the big dogs to consider us. So the first one is really around quality, especially in the Chinese cooking application. So from experience, we want to try to convey our messages without using a lot of explanation, ideally by association of working with certain brands and logos. So in the case of quality, when we first started off, we just worked with the leading Cantonese Michelin-starred restaurants in Hong Kong. So like the Duddles, the Shanghai Yes, the Mach 32s, just to get the concept, hey, even the best tasting Cantonese restaurants will use this plant-based product. The second point, more concerned by the big F&B groups, is food safety. So what's the better way to exemplify this than going to a place where a lot of kids and families eat? So in this case, we focus a lot on a second partnership with Disneyland. Disneyland has a regional level of food safety standards, and obviously you can imagine, you're not really going there to have a very tasty burger, but you're going there to have a good time. And Disneyland focuses a lot so that kids going there, they don't have a stomachache after going there and puking on the roller coasters. So the third point. So being a Hong Kong-based startup, we focused a lot on brand recognition domestically. So when we founded the company back in 2020, there was definitely some political movements and considerations around where are your products really made from. So here we definitely, even at the expense of higher cost structures, we started everything here in Hong Kong from scratch, from sourcing raw materials to producing products, and actually building a local community to support our plant-based food products. Fourthly, being a local-based startup, it definitely makes sense to participate in ventures where you're supported by the government. So we made an effort to, be incubated by the Hong Kong Science Park and participate in competitions from the Trade Department. And luckily, we're supported by both. And last but not least, when you work with the big F&B groups, they care a lot whether, hey, are you here for the long run? Are you going to disappear after just applying for 3 months? Because for them, they don't tender on a monthly basis. They tender on an annual basis. They don't want to just switch the supplier midway. And imagine you're Cathay Pacific. You launch a new menu. You don't want to replace all the menus like after 3 months because the vendor suddenly went bankrupt. So here we did also pursue a venture funding to get that extra credibility from a financial perspective. And just building around all these numbers, we try to make the best case that we can as to why plant seafood. And in this case, we were fortunate also, for example, to work with Cathay Pacific and be part of their airline menus. So those were some whys as to why we started in food and plant-based, why we also made certain products and commercial decisions in what we do. And here are just some ideas and sharings that we have as the closing. So with the evolution of technologies and also AI and also different applications around the market, I think entrepreneurship is definitely a career path that I think an increasing number of us will be pursuing compared to the more conventional jobs. And here are 3 whys that we want to share today as to things you should think about and ask yourself before you pursue entrepreneurship. So the first question is, why this problem? So why this problem comes in very different angles. So why this problem? Is it a big enough problem? Is it impactful enough problem? Is it a problem that can really make you money? I think back to Ikigai, is it something that gets you paid? But most importantly, why this problem? Because does it motivate you on a very, very personal level? Because working on a startup, depending on how you see this, it's not like a weekly or monthly thing. It's something that goes much longer if you want to succeed on the biggest stage. And there are days definitely you don't want to work on a project, and you need that personal motivation to get over that hump. So the second why here, why now? Different technologies, different products suit different timelines. You want to check and make sure whatever you're thinking about, the solution and product you're looking at, The infrastructure isn't ready. The distribution channels isn't ready. The economy, how is it looking? Is it ready for like products with a certain margin requirement? And also, are consumers ready? And consumers, you gotta look at, hey, consumers in region A versus region B. Different locations, different regions, different education levels, different purchasing powers, this all have an impact on what you're trying to do. And this all impacts the success of your startup. So you definitely should look at why are you pursuing this entrepreneurship idea today. And the last one we want to cover today is why this team. So here it's more about what are the unique insights that you have that others in the market do not have. So in the case of Good Food Technologies, my co-founder and I, we had a massive passion for Chinese foods. We also have an engineering background, and we were passionate enough to actually push through to innovate a plant-based fat that really worked for water-based cooking applications. So this is pretty much it from our end. I hope you enjoyed our TEDx sharing, especially on the entrepreneurial business side. And yeah, feel free to reach out to us. Thank you.